We continue our theme on gangsterism and ganglands today. Gangsterism has plagued the northern areas in Port Elizabeth in the Eastern Cape for decades. Now, community leaders there say almost 50 gang-related deaths have occurred in these areas just this year alone. But they have not given up on efforts to rehabilitate some affected gang members and youngsters. Now, more than 120 people have died in the gang-related violence thus far. Let's take a look at the story.
Earlier this year, a multidisciplinary task team consisting of detectives, crime intelligence, tactical response team and Hawks members was formed to curb violence in this area. More than 250 people have died in gang violence in the past 2 years. Community members have often fell victim and continuously fear for their lives.
If you stay in Helen, in this place, you are living in danger because it's shooting any time of the day, every time of the day. You can go to church, you can go to school.
To the gangs out there, I have small kids outside. Please, guys, stop the gang violence.
Since the launch of Operation Lockdown in this area, it is said there is some calm restored in the community.
There's been a measure of, normalcy kind of returning. But you must remember what's normal is not an end to gang violence. We've had a challenge of gang violence since the 60s. So normalcy means that there's less killings. I mean, the last time we had a gang killing here was, 3 days ago.
Social ills and lack of resources and disadvantaged backgrounds have been identified as a reason that some of these young men and women fall into the trap of gangster lives.
We've become so marginalized that we feel like a non-entity. And hence our young men killing each other out there. Life has so little value because life has so little value in our community. And that's our challenge. How do we tell people, no man, don't give up, continue hoping, when you've got a lack of access to tertiary education, a lack of access to employment, a lack of access to opportunities to improve yourself. So in the end, what happens? Our kids hustle, our young people do what comes easy.
Community leaders say law enforcement is one leg that deals with the issue of gangsterism, but much more needs to be done to rehabilitate an entire community that has been affected and infected by gang-related violence. Iviwe Boti, SABC News, Port Elizabeth.
And more than 120 people have died in gang violence in the northern areas of Port Elizabeth in the past 2 years. In 2004, there were 17 different gangs operating in the northern areas, of which 8 had ties in operations in Helenvale, and in the Galvandale areas. Last month, the police minister, you've seen him there in the picture just a moment ago, Nathi Nhleko, returned to the northern areas to assess the progress on the fight against gang activities and hence the launch of Operation Lockdown. Now, Justin Olifant is a social activist and a community leader in Port Elizabeth in the northern areas, and he joins us now on the line, in fact, in our studios there. Justin, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being very patient. It's a long discussion on gangs today, so it took some time to get to you. First and foremostly, Operation Lockdown, to what extent has it helped to curb the gang violence in the northern areas in Port Elizabeth?
I would say that in terms of, crime prevention, in terms of the intervention from SAPS, there's been a measure of success. Like I mentioned, that normalcy has, started returning to the community again. The challenges are, however, which we have is the gang problem has been so ingrained within the community for more than 50 years now already, that when we look at police intervention, we've become accustomed, to the cycle that every 2-3 years we've got gang wars, then we've got, major interventions, then it dies down and then it resurfaces, and it's kind of like a cyclical repetition constantly.
But do you feel there's an urgency to fight gangsterism in the area, especially in the northern areas? Because the minister was there. Did it make any difference there?
Difficult question. Specifically in terms of the fact that many of us believe that there's no real political will to address this challenge. When you consider that the first record of organized gangs in the northern areas of Nelson Mandela Bay goes back as far as 1963, I think the first gang back then recorded was the Panga Boys, up until 2016, where we have in an area like Galvindale, Helenvale, where we've got about 12 to 16 or more gangs fighting for that territory, over 25 gangs within the northern areas fighting for control. So in terms of leadership and in terms of intervention, in terms of concerted efforts being put in place, I would say that if nothing could have been achieved since 1963, then any efforts that are taking place now will be futile without a multi-sectoral approach. I hear this thing of multidisciplinary approach, but it's all about combating crime. It's all about vilifying the young people in our community, making bad guys, out of the kids, and profiling our people as being gangs and gangsters and stereotyping us. It's going to need a whole lot more than just policing the challenge.
That multi-sectoral approach that you're talking about, does that include the community, and to what extent is the community involved in fighting this scourge?
Elvis, if we look at the approach of leadership, very often it tends to have this pseudo-innocent, appearance, almost as if we are trying to wish away the real issues. I often mention the fact that maybe the right questions are not being answered. Maybe we're not looking, at the real core issues. And yes, of course the community will have to be included in a multi-sectoral approach, but we will also have to include, correctional services. We will also have to include all other government departments, including education, including welfare. We will need to make sure that every single leg of the pot, will be balanced properly in order for us to win this war. When I consider challenges like, lack of access for young people, challenges like the living conditions of our people, challenges like our people having become accustomed, and to an extent desensitized to the violence which we find ourselves in, the mass occurrence of PTSD within our community, it tells me that maybe they haven't really sat down and done homework and really looked at what affects us. It's commendable that the minister, Minister Ntleko, comes to walk in our community. Maybe not, as commendable that he comes to walk the same streets which we have to live on, the same challenges which we have to face, with a bunch of bodyguards. Maybe not as commendable that he comes to our community trying to fit in with the little floppy hat and the sneakers, and we don't need parading. We don't need the appearance of I understand what you're going through. We need concrete interventions. We need challenges which the community lives with. We need that to be addressed concretely. Like Helenvale, for instance. Helenvale is a community which was supposed to be a temporary settlement to address the challenges of housing during the forced removals era. And now, 50 years later, we still have the Helenvale challenge, except now a community which was supposed to house 9,000 people, house over 35,000 people. The challenge we have now with housing, specifically in the Helenvale area, we hear now promise of about 2,500 houses being built. Yeah. My question is, who's going to have to sit and watch, who's going to get houses, who's going to sit back, and think, oh, they didn't give me anything.
Justin?
We need to go back to the drawing board, and we need to address the real challenges, and that is the community is sitting on the ash heap without hope.
Justin, thank you so much for your time. Unfortunately, there's a lot more to discuss here as well, but we've run out of time. Thank you so much for your time. That was Justin Olifant, a social activist and community leader in Port Elizabeth in the northern areas. Now, what a discussion. I hope that you join in that discussion on the Facebook page as well as on the Twitter handle. But we got to say bye for now. We'll be back at the top of our hour in 3 minutes. Stay tuned.